And with that, welcome all of our participants to our March 2022 ASQ Technical Community, ASQ Innovation Technical Community, How to Measure and Visualize Your Culture Transformation with Mr. Jesse Rocket Fewell. You'll never forget his name again, folks. I want to share, because all of you should have heard or read his bio on our ASQ Innovation Technical Community site, but I'll share a fun fact about him first, and then we'll go over his full bio. So his fun fact is he was an Army brat and lived abroad in Germany as a teenager. So quiz later, you get extra points if you know this later on. Where he played basketball at the same club that tennis legend Mr. Boris Becker came from. So even though he never met Boris Becker and he never played tennis, he got to be a really cool basketball American for a few years to tell that story. So extra RU points if you answer correctly in the quiz.
There you go. There you go.
Yes, okay. So without further ado, Mr. Jesse Fewell has mentored thousands of technology professionals across 14 countries, helping them improve their teams and their companies using agile methods. He's founded startups, contributed to 3 industry certifications, and authored a plethora of publications, reaching over 500,000 readers in 11 languages. He has been bestowed on by IEEE Computer Society the Golden Core Award for his journey and his professionalism and his relationships and thought leadership across the globe. Today, he specializes in helping agile leaders and professionals get the reward and recognition of transforming their chaotic and sometimes overcommitted workplace to produce the best results of their careers. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our maestro of the evening, Jesse Fewell.
Wow, wow, wow. Rhonda, let me just say thank you for that introduction. Boxing promoter Don King has nothing on you. Like, you need to be my promoter as we're going forward in our careers and lives. Let me just say thank you to everybody for allowing me to come and share some thoughts about how to navigate our culture at the workplace. A lot of us really just didn't sign up for this. A lot of us know that it takes a really healthy culture and a balanced culture for us to do great work, especially as quality professionals. But then you show up and you start hearing a few things. Well, you know, that's just not how we do things here. And then you start hearing, you know, well, you better not do that because then the vice president of super important things will frown at you very fiercely. Frown. And so they're like, why don't people just want to do a good job? And so we want to talk about this, particularly from an engineering perspective. What if you could actually engineer culture? Because a lot of us are quality engineers and can move at this from a very quantitative perspective. But when it comes to culture, it's like fuzzy and nebulous and difficult to put our hands around it. So that's what we want to explore tonight, this evening, as a way to help expand our perspectives as professionals. And I do want to share with you, just to admit, yes, hi, my name is Jesse, and I am an agile person. Agile methods tends to be kind of where I spend a lot of my time and energy these days. And yet, I have served as a software engineer for my first career. My second career was as a project manager. I still self-identify as a project manager. Thank you very much. And yet, I'm finding that no matter what your role, no matter what your industry, this topic keeps coming up again and again and again. So that's what we want to talk about tonight. Now, here's the first message. Here's the first message, and if you take nothing away from this hour, here's the one thing I want to inspire and encourage you with, which is this. The culture at the office is not a barrier. It's literally half the job. And so, for example, as a project manager, I might be frustrated that a culture of analysis paralysis is getting in the way of things getting done. Or I might be frustrated that a culture of follow the highest paid person's opinion is getting in the way of the right solution being pursued. And I'm just like, the culture's in the way. Well, you know what, project manager, Jesse, what if half of the problem is that, or half of the job is to foster a culture that does explore the right solution regardless of what the boss says? Or part of my job as a project manager is to foster a solution that does want to get stuff done instead of analysis paralysis. What if half of our job is helping people appreciate the other half of the job? And so it's not just getting good work done, but it's also helping create an environment where good work is actually valued. Now, it sounds really, that's great, but you know, I don't have a fancy job title. I'm not an executive. I'm not a manager. I can't just mandate that people suddenly value quality. I can't just mandate people suddenly value good planning. So how do you fix that? And that's what we want to talk about. But just appreciate what we tend to think is getting in the way is actually part of our job. And so let's explore that a little bit more. Here's the agenda that we have. We're going to first explain what the culture challenge is. Then we're going to introduce a framework for measuring that culture. We're going to get quantitative, analytical. We're going to put I got my nerd glasses. I can do it. That's right. I'm supposed to be wearing these blue filters anyway. And then we're going to talk about the culture of where you work matters, but it's not the only matter. And so some people say, well, Jesse, you don't understand because I work at the office over in the UK, or you don't understand, I work at the office over in India, or I work in the office over in Mexico, and our culture there is totally different. It could possibly do it. Well, turns out there's some data. That's right. There's data that talks about culture from a country perspective as well as a company perspective. And then finally, we're going to go back to that framework, and we're going to hit you with half a dozen insights that you can get from measuring your culture. So that's what we have to look forward to. And let's start first with kind of describing what the challenge is, which is culture is hard. It's really hard. Like, imagine you're coming in with this new initiative. We're going to, remember TQM? Remember those days? Everyone has ownership of quality. And then immediately people are going to start, this is just a fancy way of getting us to do more work. Let's just hold out. This is the boss's new fad of the week. And, let's be honest. There's nothing wrong here. Everything's fine. Let's just not, whatever you do, don't do work. Okay? Let's just not change anything. Because we want to keep things the way they've always been. And so a lot of us who are champions of doing things better, champions of improvement, we just get, if I hear one more time, So here's two definitions that can help you get your handle on what all of that is. Culture can be described as the way we do things around here. It's a combination of processes and policies and practices. It might be formal, like processes and policies. It might be informal, like traditions and habits. Likewise, we can also say culture is the set of behaviors that we expect and the set of behaviors that we tolerate. So if we tolerate people blowing through dates, then that's part of our culture. If we tolerate people this kind of, let's just shave off some testing so we can sneak it out the door, well, then that becomes part of our culture. And so these two definitions can help us kind of pin down what it is that we're talking about with our culture It's really about patterns of behavior. So when we have that in mind, what we see is that this is a common struggle, even in the technology space. So DevOps is a hot movement in the technology world, where it's about automation, it's about collaboration between the development function and the operations function in the tech space. And if you were to ask them, what are the top barriers to a better performing IT organization? This study comes out and says, half of it is the red stuff with infrastructure, quality, and complexity. But honestly, as much as half of it is the green stuff with the culture and legacy processes and legacy expectations. And so even when it comes to a technology initiative, as much as here in this case, 43% of the barriers to improving our technology, our engineering, our quality functions, it's the soft stuff that's getting in the way. So that's part of the challenge. So one of the challenges is, how do we name it? How do I identify it when it's just behaviors and expectations? Another one is that this keeps showing up again and again. One would think that a global pandemic would change the equation, but it didn't. The State of Business Agility report came out in the height of the pandemic and found that even in if we don't change our business model, restaurant, we will go out of business. And a lot of restaurants did with curbside delivery, and suddenly now everybody's on the mobile delivery apps. But a lot of companies didn't make it. A lot of companies folded. A lot of organizations just continue to struggle because culture still shows up as a top 5 barrier to change, even when your very existence depends on change. So this is not easy. Oh, and by the way, if anybody wants to go agile, we're going to be super awesome. We're going to get more collaboration. We're going to get more speed and value. And then the 15th annual report for the state of the agile conversation comes back and says, the number 2 barrier is our organizational culture is at odds with agile values like collaboration and deliver frequently and adapt your plans. Our culture doesn't tolerate those things. But if you look at the number 3, organizational resistance to change, down there at 22% towards the bottom, unwilling to admit mistakes, minimal collaboration, you start to see, hold on, this culture, it's showing up in multiple ways. This culture barrier is showing up in multiple ways. And so it can be not just like this intangible, unnameable thing, hard to describe, but can also be insidious, popping up here, popping up there. Even when the very transformation is supposed to be about a culture. And so what I tell people is that change is a twofold endeavor. And agility, and for the work that I do, is about helping organizations evolve, improve, and pivot into more agile ways of working. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. But regardless of the change that you're going for, if you're trying to roll out a PMO, if you're trying to build a productized organization, if you're trying to do a digital transformation or a quality transformation, it's a twofold endeavor. There's the structures and the methods, processes, policies, templates, tools. Those are the tangible things. But it's not going to stick. It's not going to sustain if we don't also address the intangible, which is the culture and the mindset. Methods and mindset. Structures and culture. And so if you're doing things, techniques like full stack teams and modern platforms and short delivery cycles, embedded customers, these are a lot of agile buzzwords. You should be doing those things by paying attention to the relationships and the languages and the symbols of what success means and growth and improvement. It's a twofold endeavor. It's literally half the job. So that's kind of the challenge that we're facing, and hopefully that kind of resonates with some of you to set the stage for, okay, well, how do you measure that? How do you measure the fact that we're not changing and we're not moving and evolving? So let's take a look at the competing values framework. This is a framework that comes out of the University of Michigan. And there's an x-axis and a y-axis. On the y-axis, we've got a spectrum where we emphasize, our culture emphasizes on one extreme, flexible people. Our people are our greatest asset. Thank you, HR person. Or focused systems. Well, on the other end of the spectrum, we're super efficient. Okay? Those are both virtuous. They're both valuable. But they're kind of in tension with each other, right? The more flexible the people, the more unfocused our systems. The more focused our systems, the more inflexible our people can be. It's a spectrum. Likewise, that's the y-axis. On the x-axis, we have a tension between focusing on the internal present reality. You know, we have a lot of conflict across departments, and you know, we really need to take care of our people and make sure that they're following our processes properly, versus a focus on the external future reality. The external, I got a little animated there, bumped my own microphone. External future reality. And that's, you know, like we got to be disruptive and innovative. We got to capture market opportunity out there, which is in tension. I mean, both of these are virtuous. All four of these are virtuous, but they're kind of in tension with each other. And when you take a look at this, you start to see 4 quadrants. And that is that when we've got flexible people focused on an internal present, we're collaborating. We do things together. Everyone's got a voice and we develop each other. When we're flexible people focused on external futures, that's more about creativity. External futures with focused systems is about competitive drive, doing things fast and going out there, achieving our stretch goals because we're super efficient. And then having focused systems that focus on our internal present is about having an organization that's under control. And I don't mean controlling as in micromanaging. I mean that it's under control so that it's not out of control. Because we're doing things right. We're organized, efficient, safe, reliable. And if you look at this grid, all of these are wonderful, beautiful, fantastic. They're virtuous. No one's going to get fired for saying we need creativity. No one's going to get fired for saying we want collaboration or efficiency, organizational excellence, and competitive drive. No one's going to get fired for saying those things. And yet, there's tension here, where one good thing comes at the cost of potentially doing another good thing. So if we want to have an organization that's safe, reliable, efficient, predictable, consistent, and under control, that means we do things right. But into doing things right, we probably need to stop doing all those crazy new ideas all the time. Like those people who want to be a create culture, where they want to do things first. We want to do things that's never been done before, cutting edge, never kill an idea, taking risks. Well, by definition, hot shot, if you're being hyper creative, by definition, you're doing something that's never been done before. You're literally breaking the rules. And if you're breaking the rules, that might be some quality concerns there, might be some compliance concerns there. Likewise, if we're all about collaborating together as a family with loyalty, we plant seeds, we trust each other, well, that might mean we're probably going to go slower to take time to bring people along, which comes in conflict with hitting our stretch goals, doing whatever it takes. Knowledge is power, up or out, go, go, go fast. Because you know what? In order to get fast, we're just going to have to leave the slow people behind. And so both of these are virtuous, but at the end of the day, too much of one means that we don't get enough of the other. It's just no two ways. This is why we have arguments all the time about whether we should do this project or that project, or whether we should comply with this process or that process. Because any virtue has tension with another virtue. You know, like tastes great, but doesn't have, has too many carbs, or no carbs, but man, it tastes like paper. both of those are good things, right? It's like, like being health conscious, but then also actually enjoying what you eat for once. So every virtue has tension with another virtue. How do we quantify that? How do we understand that? Well, what we can do is, what if we were to distribute 100 percentage points in any culture? And if we were to ask, in a given day, what does your culture emphasize most? Like, what percentage of your culture emphasizes creativity? What percentage of your culture emphasizes collaboration? And if you were to have a complete balance average, it would be 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. But usually what happens is we're out of balance. And you have some organizations where people are saying, you know what, 35% of every conversation is really about hitting the planned dates. It's really about compliance with our internal policies. Like, we're so obsessed with doing things right, we only have an 18 percentage point emphasis on creativity. And, and our collaboration is roughly about, 28 percentage points. That's about average. But our competitive drive at 19 points is well below the 25-point average. And that's why we need more. We got to figure out more cultural ways to emphasize getting work done, because it's just not getting done because we're out of balance in a control emphasis. So I like to tell a lot of these agile hotshots that if you're coming in talking about, we need to fail fast and, fail forward, like, okay, every time you say the word fail, the culture, the control culture that you have is ready to throw you out of the building. You're just talking nonsense. Also, if you're talking about, we're going to be self-organizing teams because we want a lot of creativity, well, that's going to sound like violating standards. And so instead, if I'm an agilist and I'm talking to a control culture, I might want to emphasize methods that deal with customer satisfaction and improvement and speed, so that we understand why. Why are we trying to move from our current cultural emphasis to a different cultural emphasis? Why do we want more creativity at all? And that's a really powerful conversation to have. So this is what the framework looks like. This is how you were to measure it. And you could also go from the other direction. What if you were to start up? What if you were to start up where everything is about new ideas and let's try this and let's try that? And now the emphasis is on the other side of the coin. And then you're trying to come in with big transformation. You're like, you know what? Your agile stuff has too many stupid meetings. It's just meetings all the time. I just want to go out and do fun things. Or there's no way that design fits inside your agile cycle, your iteration deadlines. It doesn't make it. There's no way we can fit. You're just too aggressive. We need to slow down to fit all the design work that I want to do nonstop all the time. And so your messaging, transformation, change management, hotshot, it needs to be tailored around why do we need a better balance here. So that's how it works. What I'd like to do now is test this out. So I'm wondering in here in the chat window, do we have a chat? Yes, we do. In the chat window, I just opened mine up. On the count of 3, I'm going to ask you to weigh in to chat into the chat box your opinion. In your office today, what value does your culture most emphasize? In your office today, don't do it just yet. Do you find that more than anything else, your current culture is about doing things right? That, wow, quality actually is prioritized here. Or do you find actually that, no, we like to cut corners a lot. Here, we're all about compete, doing things fast. Or someone else would say, I wish we could ever get things done. Not only are we not doing things right, we're taking forever. We're just all about the latest shiny object, new ideas. We're a create culture. Or are we a collaborate culture? So on the count of 3, I want you to type into the chat window, which of these 4 is the most emphasized in your culture today? Ready? 1, 2, 3, type. Control. Rhonda's coming in with, it's balanced. It's all equal, 25%. Oh, I love, okay, are you accepting applications right now? Control, create, says Christina. Christina, what's up? Andrew, thank you for typing in. Control, anastasis, says control. Thank you for participating. Anyone else want to weigh in? 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Okay, so we're going to close our informal poll. And let's say that we were to ask this to every person in our department. What if we were to ask this question to every person in our business unit or every person in the company? What we might come out with, just like you did, is a set of different numbers. And it might look like something like this, where if everyone we asked this question, 15% said, oh, we do things right, but not as much as we really about going out the door way too fast. We're adrenaline junkies here and out of control, even too much where our creativity is a little bit below average and our collaborate is a little bit below the 25% average. Man, we're just way out of control going too fast. And it's not just your opinion. What makes this powerful is it's the aggregate mean of everyone's opinion. You know, boss, it's not just me saying you're an adrenaline junkie who wants to go so fast that we're losing control of the organization. It's all 100 people that work for you that believe this. And here's the data. Now, if you don't want to be the person to make that point, you can hire an expendable consultant, Jesse, to go in there and say that for you and get shot, so the messenger gets shot. But this is the message. And this is how you turn the intangible into something tangible. This is how you can quantify your culture, because in the social sciences, surveys make the intangible tangible. That's how all of the social sciences work, whether it's anthropology, or sociology, behavioral economics. I mean, this is how we do it. We ask a set of questions from multiple dimensions, and then we compile the data, and cha-ching, here comes a profile. So that's how it works, is you just ask. And then what comes back is a set of data that then can foster a conversation. Wow, the data, you know what, this is just your opinion. No, it's not actually. It's 100 opinions. And yeah, I know it's a bitter pill to swallow, but we have changes that we need to make as an organization that's just out of control. So that's the framework, and we're going to do a little bit of a detour for a few minutes here, because the number one question I get trying to wrap our heads around this is, Jesse, but what about my country? What about, because a lot of us are working in large, complex organizations that have offices in multiple places, or many of us, particularly in the U.S., have people that are foreign nationals that are working on our projects that bring kind of a real technical depth of expertise from their home country, wherever that might be. And so we start kind of nudging, we get it, because that person over there is from a different country, so they don't emphasize there the way things that we emphasize here. And so there are a lot of stereotypes that we see about different countries and their cultures that bring a certain kind of bias to the office. So we want to unpack that for a few minutes and see how does that impact our understanding of measuring culture in general. So how does my corporate culture relate to my country culture? And for that, I want to introduce you to the Hofstede Insights. This has been a long-standing research instrument that has been super insightful, that measures domestic culture on 6 dimensions. And so if you were to ask 6 questions of a particular person that works in a particular country, One of those questions would be about power distance and hierarchy, and hierarchy about like how flat are organizations in that culture. Individualism. What is the degree of interdependence a society maintains or interdependence a society ignores? Masculinity, it's kind of a clumsy name for this, cultural bent. I probably would call it more about drive. So is the culture more about wanting to be the best and wanting to go out there and achieve things, or is it about being content and satisfied and liking where we are and what we do? They contrast those masculine energies with feminine energies. That's the wording they use. Uncertainty avoidance, the extent to which we feel and treat ambiguity as a threat. And long-term orientation as about holding on to the past versus embracing the future. Those are two extremes. And then indulgence, delayed gratification versus instant gratification. So these are the 6 dimensions, and if you add it up, it creates an opportunity to contrast some countries. So here's a case study. What if we had Berlin, Bangalore, and Boston? What if we had Germany, India, and the U.S.? Well, the German stereotype is Germans are too pragmatic. They're not very creative. They want to do things a very certain way. And you can see here in blue, they score higher than the other 2 countries on avoiding uncertainty. We have to have a plan. Remember, Jesse gets to do the funny accent because he learned to live with Germans and play in the Bundesliga. And they're also scoring higher than everyone else on long-term orientation. Like having a broader vision of where we've been and where we are versus just chasing after the future. And yet, if that's the stereotype, the Germans aren't too terribly creative. They're not too terribly innovative. They're the people that you go to for being super like process-oriented. During the height of the pandemic, we saw a report here that Berlin's art scene was seeing a revival in the middle of the pandemic. And so that kind of goes against the stereotype that Germans are only about a certain pragmatism. And then also, there's a stereotype that Indians don't want to upset the hierarchy. Look at this number about power distance. That if you're from India, you're all about following the chain of command. Don't upset the apple cart, and we don't want to have to worry too much about following rules because the rules are there to keep people contained. And yet, if you take a look here at this post, there are Indian unicorns, which are explosive high growth companies that are disrupting the power structures in the marketplace all the time. So that stereotype doesn't stick all the way through. And then Americans don't appreciate the impact they have on others because they're all about individualism. Look at their scoring off the charts in individualism. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Take care of yourself. DTY, DTA, don't trust anybody, just go. Well, if Americans fulfill that stereotype, then they probably wouldn't be giving a record $500 billion in charity in the height of the pandemic. And so what we see here is that your country culture is more nuanced than you think it is. Yeah, the data shows a pattern, but the data shows a pattern that is often defied by the very people that we assume fall into that pattern universally. So the way that I like to look at it, and the way I tell a lot of leaders and professionals, is that your country culture does not define your company culture. It's only one factor. When I was working, I lived in Bangalore for 2 years. And when I was there, I had a lot of Indian professionals telling me, Jesse, you don't understand the Indian context. You're a Westerner, and you don't understand here that that we have to follow the process. We have to follow the hierarchy. And then I would have to tell them, excuse me, but I'm from Washington, D.C., where bureaucracy is the name of the game. And they would say, really? Americans follow hierarchy? Well, let me just introduce you to all of these government projects that aren't going anywhere, and yet somehow they're still violating all of their quality controls. How can you do both things at the same time? I don't understand. And yet, I would meet several Indian entrepreneurs that were just doing these amazing startups that would have a very challenging collaborative dynamic where a lot of constructive conflict would create new ideas. So your country culture does not define your company culture. It's only one factor. So if you're working with foreign nationals, don't buy into the stereotype as being universal. And if you find yourself working in another country, don't let your American identity be your only identity as a professional. You bring more to the table, and your company brings more to the table than the country it's based in. So now that we know that there's more nuance to our company and our organizational cultures than just where we are, now that we know that there's more nuance to our cultures than just doing things right or doing things fast, that there's actually tension here, what are the big insights that we can gain? And I got half a dozen of them here I want to walk you through. The first one is we can analyze the culture gap. We can ask, what's the current state of emphasis versus the preferred state? And so if we were to ask here, what we're seeing in this measurement is that we don't have enough creativity. We're below average on the creativity. We want to boost that by 6 points. In that collaborative dynamic, we really want more collaboration. We want to be known for it. And so we want to go from an average collaboration, 25 points, to boost it by 5 more points. But to do that, we're going to have to shave off some points from somewhere else. And so what that means, and yes, I'm aware of the typo in the math, and what that means is we need to go on a journey from our current state, solid line, to our preferred state, dotted line. And when as a change champion, as a project manager, as a change manager, or as a transformation champion, or a quality champion, you're trying to emphasize quality as a way that can foster creativity. Quality is a way to foster competitive drive, and quality is a way to foster collaboration. You could say, sure, we want to do things right, and we also want to do it in a way that's balanced with creativity and collaboration and competitive drive. And so there might be some data here that pops up that says we need to evolve our culture from being out of balance to being too much emphasizing the focus systems to being a little bit more balanced, where we've got a better emphasis on the flexible people in the top half. So the first benefit is measuring our culture is we can visualize this gap. The second one is we can analyze the misalignment. If we were to do the survey data and split it up based on org levels or locations, we might notice that we don't agree as much as we think, like India, Germany, and USA. So in this actual data, this survey says that Berlin, first, all 3 of us, look at the collaborate culture in the the collaborate quadrant in the upper left. All 3 offices agree we have the exact collaboration we need. Not only do we agree where we are, we agree that where we are is right about where we need to be. That's hugely, hugely powerful. It means we're not fighting on how we get along. It's pretty good. Meanwhile, Berlin has the most work to do of letting go of control. Check out the black solid line in the control quadrant versus the black dotted line. That's the biggest gap between solid and dotted. Meanwhile, look in the upper right at the create quadrant, and you see that green solid line standing by itself. Well, that's because Bangalore is the most creative right now. And they could be a role model, particularly to Berlin, about how to let go of control and be a little bit more creative. And so we can measure the misalignment of cultures. We can measure why it is that this office is a little bit more bent out of shape than this office. And it might not be because Germans are too pragmatic and Indians are super creative. It might simply be that one executive in that office happens to have a personal preference for being under control or a personal preference for lots of crazy shiny objects. Sometimes it's not the country, sometimes it's that one executive running that one office. The next insight that we can get, and so if we're measuring these things, we can analyze the nuances of the culture, because every culture is like an onion. There's lots of layers. So we could ask about, what are the dominant characteristics? What about our leaders? What about how we manage employees, or what our strategic emphasis is, or how would you define success? And then we might end up with, so then we would answer like a more specific question, and each of the questions would emphasize different parts of the quadrants, right? Here's question number 5 as an example. And this is, it's called the Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument. This is the original 6 questions that came with the framework. And what they come up with is 6 different graphs. And with these 6 different graphs, we might find deeper insights. So, for example, on number 3, what we all agree is that we need way more creativity for question number 3. Both the red managers and the black employees, the black line employees, agree we need more creativity in how we manage our staff. And the black leaders and red employees. Meanwhile, in number 6, how do we define success? And what we might see here is that in the competitive drive, the employees in red do not, employees in red do not see that our current state of success is strictly about going fast, the way that leaders see it's all about going fast. If you see the leaders in the black line in question number 6, they're off the charts saying, go, go, go. Competitive drive is what success is about. And so the leaders are leaving a lot of their staff behind. And that's why they're frustrated that they can't keep up and they're not hitting dates and they're not going fast enough, because there's a fundamental disconnect on the belief system. And now it's not just about having a grumpy boss who says you're all slow all the time. Why are you never fast enough? Now we have data that says, boss, they're not slow. You're just scoring off the charts on competitive drive. Now we can have a conversation about getting a little bit more aligned. And then finally, we have one way where we can measure the progress. So each of these lines, each of these colors represents a different year of the culture journey. We can start measuring gaps and differences. So like we might find out, for example, in year 1 to year 2, there was no change in the control quadrant. None. It wasn't until year 2 that there was change. So we can visualize the journey as we're going along. Also, we might now understand why all of our best practices are not resonating with people. So, like, everyone's fine with our collaboration. So you talking about happiness metrics, that's not resonating with people. We're fine. We don't need to change. On the other hand, we need to talk about creativity and control. So empower teams sounds great for create culture that we want to do, but maybe we first want to introduce some boundaries and guidelines so that we know what empower teams does not mean. And now we can have a more constructive conversation because we understand which best practices are starting to resonate. So this is the competing values framework. It's what I wanted to share with you today, that you can measure your culture because you kind of have to, since it's literally half the job. And we don't want to be out of control as an organization, but we also don't want to shut down all the innovation potential we have, nor problem solving that we have, nor do we want to let go completely of doing things together or doing things in a timely fashion. We need to find the right cultural balance. So that's what we talked about today, is finding cultural balance. And here's the next step. Knowledge is power, but knowledge without action is a waste of time. So take action. Foster a dialogue to replace politics with alignment. You can just use this framework as a template just to have the conversation. What do you think we are? What do you think we should be? Are we too far over here? Are we too far? Should we be more over there? Or you could just run the survey. We can offer help with running the survey, or you could just Google up the Competing Values Framework survey and check out the questions and run it yourself. And then if you want to get help, then get some help on this. Maybe talk to a facilitator, maybe talk to somebody that knows how to do it. I myself, I'd like to offer you the chance to go deeper with some knowledge in a workshop that we have. Again, typo, not December 6th, but rather in May, we have another one of these workshops coming up. But if you want to talk about how maybe you and your leadership team or your managers might want to get a better understanding of this, feel free to just hit me up for a chat. I love chatting with people about this. No obligation, totally free, just to talk with other professionals heart to heart about how we can change our cultures to be more sustainable in your specific environment. So we got a little bit of time to talk about some questions that might be on your mind. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat window or in the Q&A window. We'd love to hear your thoughts. But thank you so much for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So we have the questions rolling in. So first question for you, Jesse, is how do you measure the level of the 4 culture categories in a company?
So Anastasis, I hope that's how I say your name. And Rhonda, we might ask to unmute this question to elaborate a little bit further, because the way we would measure it is we would just run those questions and ask people to score out of 100 percentage points, what percentage of your culture is emphasizing this culture category versus this one versus this one. So it's just about running the survey is how you would do the measurement. Is that the question you were asking, Anastasis?
I'm unmuting her now. Hello. Oh, yes. She says yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. It's all about surveys. Surveys is how the social sciences take something fuzzy, like culture, and turn it into something quantitative, to move from the qualitative to the quantitative. You got to do the surveys. So thank you for the question. Thank you for clarifying. What else is on your minds?
I think we have another question. What if I don't have leadership buy-in or approval to run an all-hands survey? How can I still use this framework?
That is an excellent question, because it really gets to the point of asking the question, is this really my job? Because I don't have the fancy title. And 2 ideas come to mind. Number 1, you may not have the authority in your role to run the survey for the entire company, but you might have the authority to run it for your team of 10 people or your project of 7 people. And with just 7 data points or 10 data points, you can get an aggregate average that tells a story. And then you put that in front of the supervisor and say, here's why we're arguing all the time. Because each of us has a different preference for what awesome looks like. Some people believe awesome is about going fast. Some people believe awesome is about more ideas. Some people believe awesome is about quality more than anything else. And that's why you might feel alone, because you're the only one championing quality. And now finally you have data that visualizes why you're the one that has to keep bringing it up in meetings, because nobody else cares. And now you have data that backs that up, because all you did was run the survey not for all 125 employees, but just for the 5 on your team or the 7 on your team. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is don't run a survey. Don't worry about the data, but go to the next committee meeting or the next management meeting and just show them the 4 quadrants. Just show it to them and say, this is what a balanced organization looks like. A balanced organization is one that's under control, gets things done, empowers people to solve problems creatively, and is on the same page. That's what a healthy organization is. Are we there yet? How are we not there yet? And I wanted to bring this up in the lessons learned meeting that we had scheduled today. And that's so you could bring it up in a lessons learned meeting. You could bring it up in a team check-in, or even in a planning meeting. You could talk about, for this project, which of these four is the most important emphasis for this particular project. So you may not have the authority to run a survey for everybody, but you can run it for a small team just by going off and typing those questions maybe into a Google form. And then even if getting that data is still a little bit too risky for you relationship-wise and politics-wise, you can just bring that quadrants in as a conversation template and talk about it. Excellent question.
Thank you, Jesse. Fantastic. We have another. While it's really interesting to visualize our culture, how do we go about changing it?
That's the magic question, isn't it? That's the $1 million question. Yeah. So this was all fun and games until I actually tried to make something happen. And then all of the resistance starts coming out. We could never run that practice in our organization. We don't have the maturity for it, or we don't have the funding for it, or we don't have, and that'll never work here, if you've heard that one. So how do we change it? And the answer, two things come to mind. One is by fostering the conversation, you start bringing awareness, but especially to managers, supervisors, and leaders. And by leaders, I mean anybody in a position of influence. And that includes you. All of you are quality leaders. You're leading the quality initiative, the quality competencies. You might not have a fancy title, but you better believe that people are looking to you. Hey, what would it look like if we were to do this right? And you came to the right person. So just by raising the conversation, you're raising awareness about the topic, especially to other key influencers. Who are the other team leads, tech leads, or who are the other supervisors that are interested in this conversation? Just by talking about it, you can then start asking, what are some experiments that we could do to see whether we might nudge a little bit more in a doing things right direction? Or what are some experiments that we can do? And I've been persuaded by a colleague of mine that emphasizing experiments lowers the anxiety level that says that Jesse's coming in with all of his best practices. I'm just going to say, hey, listen, we're going to try something for a couple of weeks, and if it works, it's great. If it doesn't, no problem. And the experiments really include changing something physical. So in order to get to the intangible, we have to do something tangible. So we might change a policy. We might say, from now on, we are aspiring. We have a guideline: 0 defects. And immediately, well, how do we know 0 defects until we measure it? Good. So now we've just inspired a new metric. How many defects do we have in each stage of the project, or each stage of our operational deliveries? And so that's an example of changing something specific: defect rates, aspirational guideline, or policy of 0 defects. Another policy might be cloud first. All new projects must prioritize cloud first. That's a new policy. And you better believe now that as a result of cloud first, we're going to have a lot more creative ideas about how we're going to make that happen. So in order to change our beliefs, we have to maybe forcibly change some physical behaviors until we get into the rote habit of actually saying, oh, you know what, this isn't so bad. I wasn't so sure at the beginning, but now that we're starting to prioritize 0 defects, it's actually kind of fun to whack the bugs right when we find them immediately without even bothering to wait and put them into the next emphasis. So that's how I would do it. Start the conversation to bring awareness, but then also do some experiments on physical things like processes, policies, metrics, and certain committees and get-togethers. things that we do can help influence things that we believe.
That is phenomenal. And I think we have time for one more. As quality professionals, wouldn't or shouldn't we be concerned about a deviation from a culture that emphasizes doing things right?
See, that's a powerful question, because a lot of times as professionals we're being asked to champion something or promote something that might feel is running up against our fundamental identity. So for example, I've been told that as an agilist, we're not allowed to plan anymore, and the more I emphasize planning, the more I'm violating agile principles, and you can't be adaptive, and except every plan probably needs to be replanned at the moment it's finished, because the moment it's finished, things change. So the practice of planning continuously now can be very much about being an adaptive and creative organization, because we're not beholden to the plan as a rock solid pillar in the sand. Rather, the practice of planning can, if we do it again and again, can help encourage adapting to new information. Likewise, for quality, if quality means doing things right, well, you can't do anything right if you never get anything done. Because if it's not done, then it wasn't done right. And so even though there's a lot of pressure to go fast, go fast, go fast, if we never get anything out the door, we have nothing to show for excellence and compliance and best practices. And so that's why this framework emphasizes balance. We do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. An overemphasis on creativity means that there are so many ideas thrown around all over the place, nothing ever gets done, and your idea never gets out the door. Likewise, by having an overemphasis on getting things out the door, going fast and getting it done, we leave half of everybody behind and are feeling left out, and we're now on the island of success all by ourselves with no one to celebrate with. And so I hope that resonates with you the way it does with me, that being a quality champion, it kind of means that we need to value other parts of the culture conversation as well, because our contribution is that as we get things out the door, as we do things together, and as we have new ideas, we're here to make sure that all of that is done with excellence. That's how I interpret it.
That is phenomenal. Thank you so much, Andrew, for really driving home the points of how can we think about things differently to remove or lessen the change resistance, and really to look for the jewel. The problem is actually the opportunity. Thank you so much for your session with us tonight. Folks, please follow up with Jesse Fewell with regard to the assessment, with the survey, with his findings, and we would love to be able to connect with you at a later point in time to pull the thread on how each and every one of us can be a change and a thought leader in this area. We're now going to move just to our very final slide of tonight, and that's to share with you our next opportunity. So again, thank you to Jesse, and we welcome you as the ASQ Innovation Technical Community to join our community on MyASQ. If you are an organizational member, we invite you to look at our ASQE Insights on Excellence offerings and or participate in those forums where you can share your views on quality and excellence. If you're not yet a member, we invite you to join ASQ and ASQE. And most of all, we invite you to our next webinar event on April 28th, Strategic Decision Points for Corporate Innovation with Mr. Andrew Sherwood. That is a wrap for this evening. ASQ Innovation Technical Community is out. We wish you a wonderful rest of your week, a healthy and safe weekend, and we look forward to serving you with a webinar event in April. Good night, and thanks you again, Mr. Jesse Rocket Fewell. Good night.